What's going on, guys? It's your boy Scrub here, back again with another video. Hope you guys are having a great day. I know I am. And today, ladies and gentlemen, I've got a pretty funny story that was sent in to me about another roommate. I don't know, I guess the last video just inspired him to send it in, but this one's hilarious because he somehow thought there was an ability to make the weather stop. I don't know how these people get to the point where they're like able to pay rent, even if it's just for a room in a house. Like, how do you think there's a magic button to turn the weather off and be a functional adult? Either way, I thought it'd be a good story time, so without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so this guy was living in a house with just a bunch of guys, like each guy had a room. It was not his ideal situation. He had just moved to the area and the place he was going to live fell through, so he had to get super desperate and ended up finding this room on Craigslist, which is like always a bad idea. I've never heard anyone's story about a Craigslist roommate that doesn't end with like, and that's why I regret that, you know? No one's ever like, man, that place I lived in that I found on Craigslist worked out incredibly. Maybe it is. You know, I'm not saying I've met every single person. I just feel like generally it might be better to avoid that for the roommate search part. Buying a car? Sure. Either way, he just needed a place to stay, so he gets the room set up. The price ended up working out, and at first it really wasn't that bad. Most of the guys who he lived with in the house were pretty cool and like relatively clean, but there was one guy who sucked, and the reason he sucked is he just didn't understand the idea of like shared spaces. If you're living with a bunch of people, there's just like the general idea that if you're going to be watching something in the living room, it should be something that people can like enjoy, you know? You shouldn't hog one shared area for an insanely long amount of time. If you're going to have a phone call for an extended period of time, maybe don't do it where everyone's hanging out, that type of stuff. This guy just didn't get the memo and insisted on playing video games all the time in the living room, which would have been fine if it was like the only place to play video games, but the guy had a whole setup in his room, just insisted on loudly playing games on the TV. And it's not like he would just kind of sit there quietly talking to his friends on Xbox Live and gaming. He would be having full-on screaming matches with just random people he was talking trash to in the lobby. And the living room was like connected to the kitchen, and he would start doing it early in the morning, so sometimes you would wake up to him just raging on someone that killed him in Call of Duty. If you were trying to cook anything, you had to listen to him being mad at Halo. If you wanted to bring anyone over, forget about it, because you'd open the door and he's just screaming at Crash Bandicoot, bro. But this wasn't like an insanely long-term solution. It wasn't like this is where he wanted to spend the rest of his life, and it was cheap, so he was making it work. But they lived in an area where like huge storms would come through from time to time, and it was pretty common when these storms came through that the power would go out like, you know, it was a ginormous storm. We're talking almost hurricane level type stuff. There can be some damage. You kind of had to shelter in place a little bit. And it happened that this weekend there was going to be a huge storm coming through. So the house got together and decided, just to be safe, they should get some supplies, get ready to shelter in place. So they all went, and one of them had a Costco membership. So they all go to Costco and split up, and they were supposed to like stock up, pool their supplies, and see what they had as a house. Which is pretty smart. That's being prepared, you know. You want to make sure that if it's a really bad storm, you're not screwed. So you'd think that in order to have all this emergency stuff like canned food, emergency water, batteries, flashlights, like that's what I'm thinking of. And that's what most people went and picked out, like non-perishable foods, stuff that would be good for a while, sustainable food like protein bars and whatnot, just in case they didn't have access to fresh food all the time. The refrigerator goes out, all your food goes bad, you still got stuff to eat. Well, Gamer Bro was taking this storm more like a vacation and had just got like a bunch of chips and soda, which I guess in an emergency is better than nothing. I would rather eat Lay's chips for the rest of my life than like starve to death. That's fair enough. But it was just kind of funny that they had gone to Costco to try to stock up on the emergency supplies, and he just went straight to like Mountain Dew and chips. So whatever, everybody gets back and they're organizing all their stuff, getting ready for the storm, you know, just making sure like all the windows are locked down tight. They're covering the windows with plywood. But Gamer Bro just keeps gaming like nothing's going on. They tell him he should probably make sure everything in his room's good to go, and he's like, yeah, I really don't care about it, whatever. If the storm ruins my room, it's not like I spend a lot of time there anyways. And of course, like, you know, everybody's getting a little bit annoyed with him, because imagine everyone else is seriously preparing for the thing coming and one guy's just goofing off and being like, who cares? And keep in mind, it's dumb to be getting into video games right now because there's a 90% chance the power is going to go out. So if you're really sitting down for a gaming marathon, you're going to be pleasantly surprised, or unpleasantly surprised, I should say, when nature makes the power no worky anymore. And of course, the storm starts to pick up a bit and everybody's just kind of sitting next to him in the living room. He's playing video games and they're just kind of like sitting there quietly. And it was like as the storm got angrier outside, you know, as the wind gets angrier, more and more stuff slapping up against the side of the house, he gets angrier at the game. He's screaming at everybody. The connection's bad. He's getting pissed off because he's lagging, you know. Oh, why am I lagging? Because there's a hurricane outside. But whatever, he's getting pretty angry, and all of a sudden, in the middle of one of his raging scream fests at someone else in his lobby, the power goes out. And if you've ever been in a house where the power's gone out, you know what it looks like. Everything turns off. It's really obvious. In fact, if you've never been in a house where the power goes out, you can probably imagine it right here. I'm going to show you guys how to imagine the power goes out. Close your eyes. There you go. That's what it looks like when the power goes out. So whatever, it's really obvious to everyone what's going on, that there's a power outage caused by the storm. But this guy downstairs starts freaking out, screaming, "What happened to my game? Where did my game go? Why'd the TV turn off? Why'd the Xbox turn off?" It was almost as if he just couldn't compute that there's a ginormous storm outside, and sometimes when there's ginormous storms, you lose power. But he is raging, like getting insanely mad. And a lot of the roommates had separated and gone to their rooms and stuff. So they all start convening, but they're convening on his screaming because they're all just trying to get there and figure out what's going on. And they get down there and he's still like looking at the Xbox. What happened? Why did it break? Why did all the power go out? I don't get it. And so they tell him, yo, man, the electricity's out. Like, there's no electricity to the house. Like, what do you mean? They're confused at his confusion because it's so obvious to everybody else what had just gone down. And he starts telling them that they should call the power company to get it back up. And everyone's now looking at him like he's an idiot because they're like, dude, I'm pretty sure the power company is aware of the hurricane going on outside. I don't think calling them is going to do anything. And he starts arguing back with them that, like, what was the point of paying the power bill if they weren't going to come out and fix it? It was their job to fix it, whether or not there was a storm. And they're not believing his entitlement. He really thinks that the power company workers in the middle of the hurricane shouldn't be prioritizing, you know, keeping the hospital online, making sure the fire department keeps their power. No, he wanted a team out there stat to fix their power so he could keep playing his video games. That was what mattered more than anything. So they're trying to like explain to him why that's A, stupid, and B, just not going to happen. Even if you really want them to do it, you can call the power company all day. If you said, I don't care that there's a hurricane, get someone out here to fix it, they would laugh at you, if anyone answered. I highly doubt that there's a bunch of people just chilling in the call center during the hurricane like, wow, this stuff's crazy outside, huh, Bob? Sure, I'm glad I'm here and not with my family. And so they say that it's like caused by the weather. And now he starts getting angry at the weather. His anger at the power company is being replaced now at the sky. And he starts asking his roommates questions that don't make any sense. He's like, well, why would the weather do that? I don't know, man. High pressure system, low pressure system, whatever. Like, I don't know why there's storms and why it does this. Like, what did you want them to say? Oh, hey, let me go contact it real quick. Just like go outside and start yelling at it. And one of them sarcastically said, I don't know why the weather does this. Go ask the rain. And to most people, that would be an obvious joke. But this guy apparently thought that if he went out there and started yelling at the sky, that it was just going to open up and start talking back. Everyone's kind of laughing at him as he's like looking out of the backslider going, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? And he realizes that it wasn't serious, that he wasn't supposed to go actually ask the rain. And everyone's laughing at him because, I mean, it's just an obvious joke. Like if you said, hey, go talk to the wall and see what it says, and then they went to talk to the wall, you'd probably laugh a little bit. Except now he's mad that they're laughing at him. He starts yelling at them, being like, you guys are such bad roommates. Can't you tell how mad I am that I can't play my game? You guys don't even care. You're not doing anything to get the power back on. Which, whatever. I get being upset that your roommates were laughing at you, but what do you mean they're bad roommates because they're not doing anything to get the power back on? There's a storm causing a power outage. There's nothing your roommates can do. Like, even if you had a power generator, the internet's probably still out for the entire area. And so they start asking him, like, how are we bad roommates? And he just keeps using the power outage as an example. And they start asking him, like, oh, we're bad roommates because we can't control the weather? And he finally, after being asked over and over again, like, are you really blaming us for the weather, decides to go with it instead of backing down, is like, yeah, I am blaming you for the weather. Like, I don't know why you guys can't just go make the weather stop. You don't know why they can't go make the weather stop. I can give you a few reasons, actually, and the first one is the simplest. They're not wizards. I don't know what's up with people thinking that everyone was going to Hogwarts. I think that, like, contaminated people's brains. They think magic's just floating around, dude. I feel like if the best scientists on the planet were able to prevent hurricanes, then they would. Very obviously, there's not much we can do about it. What, you think your roommates have the secret to stopping storms? That means that stopping a storm is so easy that, like, 5 guys could do it. If it's that easy to stop a storm and the government's just letting it happen, we've got some bigger issues at hand. Could you imagine? This guy's like, just go tell the storm to stop. We never thought of that. They go outside. Hey, storm, stop. It just stops. Well, we never thought of that. No one thought to ask the hurricane to stop. I don't know, man. I just don't really understand what he expected them to do. Go make the weather stop. And so they start laughing at him, even suggesting that they could make the weather stop. But he's being 100% serious. He's like, I wasn't born and raised here, but you guys were, so you should know how to do something to mitigate the weather. I don't think it's an experience thing, bro. It's not like a skill that unlocks at a certain level like it's a video game. Dude, I'm only level 8 Florida. You guys are like level 12. At level 11, you should have access to hurricane denial attack. Like that, it's not a video game, bro. I don't think there's anything that anyone can do about a storm. And so the argument's getting more and more heated because he's demanding they go out there and try to like fight the storm. Just Pierre, hold my beer while I go try to fight a freak of nature storm. Like, oh, I got it, man. Don't sweat it. So they keep telling him that he's nuts. He's getting increasingly upset that they're not being roommate enough to go help him. Still don't get what he expected them to do. And they kept asking, like they kept trying to make him understand he's being ridiculous. You know when someone's being illogical and you're not sure if they realize it or not? So you start kind of repeating the stuff back to them and being like, you do hear yourself, right? And he's hearing himself, but he just doesn't care. And so finally, after enough of a back and forth, he's like, well, if you guys aren't going to go out there and do something about the storm, then I guess I'm going to go do it myself. And he gets up and starts walking towards the back door again. And before, he had just kind of like opened it a crack and yelled outside. But when he says, fine, he's going to go do it himself, they're like, okay, Thanos, go for it. You know, you think you're going to be able to go out there and take care of this? By all means, be our guest. And so he opens the door, this time way further. And it was the only part of the house that they hadn't like put a plywood sheet on because it was supposed to be like a storm-proof door. And the second he opens it, it's evident that the storm's gotten a lot worse because it's like a torrential downpour. It's almost like someone's pointing a fire hose at the back door. There's just so much water coming through in like the way of rain. And so this water's flooding in, and he looks outside for a few seconds as this rain's just smacking him, the floor's getting wet, and then closes the door, turns around, and is like, you know what? I don't feel like this is my responsibility. I am totally brave enough to go out there and do that, but I think it's something that you guys should do. So that's on you. But like, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to go out there. I just think that you guys should. Let's be honest. He opened the door, saw the storm, and was like, okay, they were probably right. This isn't gonna work. But he was too ashamed to admit it, so he starts trying to twist it into like, I totally could, but I feel like I'm gonna leave that to you guys to prove you're a good friend. And they weren't jumping at the bit. Believe it or not, walking outside in a hurricane is not on a lot of people's bucket lists. So the argument ends, everybody kind of ends up going back to their room, and like the rest of that night, there's not power, but sometime early in the morning, the power comes back on, and it's like, you know, when they get the power going again, but it's still, there's stuff all over the street. They got to clean up a bit. It's kind of that stage of what was going on. The worst of it was over, though. And what was really interesting is the fact that the power had come on, but they hadn't been awoken to him screaming at his video game. It was almost like he was too ashamed to go down and enjoy the power once it had come back on. And everyone thought to themselves, like, wow, this might actually be a change here. He might actually realize that, like, there's nothing we could do. He might be embarrassed. This might change the way he acts. And everyone was a little bit optimistic he would stop gaming so much in the living room and being just a rage monster. So after a few more days of him just, like, really avoiding them, not having anything to do with them, they end up going back to work. And instead of, like, hiding to take the chance to apologize or, you know, maybe thinking about it and changing anything, He just ends up going back to the living room like everything is normal once everyone had been at work. And when they come home, he was just so absorbed in his video game, he went back to normal, raging the entire time and just freaking out. And he just straight up, like, did not want to mention it ever again. He really thought that he was just going to go back to playing video games for like 9 hours a day in the living room after all of that, and no one was ever going to mention it. And inevitably, when everyone was hanging out in the living room, one of them made a joke about it to him. And this guy's response wasn't to be like, yeah, okay, I was a little emotional and scared because of the hurricane. Like, whatever. I've never been in a hurricane. I'd probably be freaking out. I probably would not be very fun to be with. I'll keep it $1.50. But instead of apologizing and being like, that was a little bit ridiculous, he decides to just pretend that none of it ever happened and he had no clue what anyone was talking about. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. That didn't happen. And it's not like everybody in the house was very passionate about it, but the second he was like, that never happened, they were like, dude, that definitely happened. Like, you definitely freaked out and told us to go stop the hurricane. And he's like, dude, you're expecting me to believe that I was dumb enough to tell you to go and fight a hurricane? I know that's ridiculous. And they're like, yeah, we know that's ridiculous, but you 100% did it. I don't know what his thought was here. They 100% remembered that. That's not something that they would just make up on the spot. Like, that's some real creativity if they did just make that up. And you're going to try to convince your roommates that they had just some mass psychosis. It's not like one person misremembering something. You're going to try to convince like 5 people that they remembered something that they definitely remember. Good luck with that. Thankfully, it wasn't his living situation for much longer. Like a month after this situation, he ended up moving in with somebody that he met at work that he had like a lot more in common with, and they still are roommates to this day. But yeah, for a little bit when he was living in the Craigslist house, there was a dude who was so addicted to video games, he expected his roommates to go out there and fight a hurricane so he could keep the gaming a-going. It's a little bit too much dedication to the grind, in my opinion. I love video games, but I'm not trying to like fight a natural disaster for it. If there's an earthquake, I'm abandoning the PC. I'm not going to be like, halt, you will not come in here. I still love the idea that in this guy's mind, he's like, no, scientists can stop the hurricane. They just don't really care to. Like, they could just go tell it to stop, but they don't want to. You know, they love the damage for some reason. But yeah, anyways, guys, I think that's going to do it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed. I know this one was a little bit shorter, but if you did enjoy it, be sure to press the like button. Let me know in the comments section down below what you thought. And of course, subscribe if you're new and turn on those notifications. If you like the story times, but you'd rather listen offline or like the audio only, I do post them on Spotify, link down below. Feel free to go check that out. And yeah, on that note, I think that'll do it. Don't get anyone pregnant. If you do, make sure they're hot. And hopefully I will see each and every single one of you guys next time with another video. I'm out. Peace.